The General Motors plant in Danville, Illinois closed in mid-96. And GM even admits it's because of labor cost. They found cheaper labor that could produce the parts for almost half the price. So they shut down. 1,000 people lost their jobs. This is a picture. It looks like maybe back in the 1960s. We can see the interstate looks fairly new. And this is the bridge that goes over the old Conrail line from Danville down to Paris, Illinois. So the article goes on to say that in mid-96 they were definitely closing the plant, wiping out more than 1,000 jobs. Now this plant opened in 1943. The article goes on to say that around World War II, as many as 3,000 workers were employed at this large facility. So around 95, 96, right before it closed, the payroll was around $55 million. That's like $55,000 times 1,000 equals 55 million. So these people were making good money. Now something in this article I find very disturbing or shocking. It says a majority reason the workers voted against opening negotiations with 3 potential buyers. That means there was a possibility that other large corporations may have bought that facility and actually saved it. But the union employees, fearing their GM pensions and benefits would be in jeopardy, they all voted no on having this Danville foundry bought out by some other corporation. Now I remember when this plant closed down, it was very upsetting, very shocking. You know, when you find out that 1,000 people are going to lose their jobs. Now this picture of the plant, according to these cars kind of look like, I don't know, 1950s, 60s models. So at that time it would have been like the New York Central Railroad. And we could see train cars coming in and out of the facility. And judging by the size of an automobile compared to this plant, you can see this place was huge. I remember back in the 80s, if you got a job at GM, you were doing great. You were making money. A lot of these employees would work overtime and make like these $1,000 paychecks and all this. And this is what the facility looks like today. Only one small section remains, and from my understanding, this is available space. There is nothing being manufactured at this small section. It's just kind of slowly rusting away. So the facility today, we can barely see the railroad remains. This is actually a double track, the old Conrail line from Danville down to Paris, Illinois. It's double track for just a couple miles. Now I'm willing to bet there's a couple people out there that drive past this old complex and they probably get these emotions. Imagine working at this facility for like 30 years and then it gets destroyed. Now I did find an interesting video on YouTube. They actually show a Conrail train back in '95 coming out of Peoria headed towards the Hillary train yard right outside of Danville. And this train has 44 train cars on it, believe it or not. Some of these trains look like grain hoppers. Other cars, it looks like they're some kind of metal spindles or steel wires. And there's even a couple tanker cars. Maybe they're going to T-Pack in Danville, who knows. Now this is what I remember. As a kid back in the 80s, we drove by the Hillary yard quite frequently. And I remember seeing these scrap cars all over the Hillary train yard. And I had no idea what they were for until years later I found out the GM plant used a lot of these container cars. It would bring in scrap metal to the GM foundry, melt it down, and create new parts. So back in 1995, Conrail actually had nice size freight trains coming through Oakwood, coming right through this Hillary train yard. Then it would make its way down. Right here is that large GM plant. And then the Conrail trains would come down to Tilton and go all the way down to Paris. And there's absolutely no doubt that after '96, when this plant closed, it killed off a lot of business at this Hillary Conrail yard. But anyway, if you ever worked at this plant and you just happen to stumble upon this video, like you type in GM plant, Danville, Illinois, and you've got some interesting story or experience, just leave a comment under the video.